All right, so what we ended up doing today in class, we read for about 25 to 30 minutes in the beginning or at some point during class, or you can read for 30 minutes at some point. But then we ended up using both of our notebooks. I know that most of you do not have your notebooks at home, so you're just going to write it on a piece of paper. That's fine. Just write it on a piece of paper for now, and then you can transfer it over when you get back to school. So let's see. We start with our resource notebook first. We talked a lot about here. I probably should pull this up so I can kind of talk through what our goals were here. So we talked about character and conflict because we're moving back into fiction, and so kind of like how we did with nonfiction, how we had Patoff. Let me see if I can find that really quickly for you. Sorry. So Patoff, we did, if I can find the page. Sorry. Okay, I don't know where it is. Anyways, we did Patoff, and that was, here it is. We did that with nonfiction where we talked about purpose, topic, audience, author, and format. And that's something that as a reader for nonfiction, that's what you wanted to be looking for and just things to keep an eye out and what smart readers do for that. So we kind of have another way of doing that as well for fiction. We're going to kind of do some other stuff with that here in a little bit with some of our books. But we are going to talk a lot about conflict, talk a lot about character, setting. We're also going to talk about emotions within the character, and then we'll also talk about themes. So those are the things we're kind of think about as we read fiction. So we have character, setting, conflict, and theme. And then along with that character, we're talking about emotions and how that drives the story. And kind of the whole purpose in doing something ties back to the theme because everything that the author does ties back to why they're actually writing the piece, which is their theme, trying to get a lesson or something across to the reader. Okay? All right. So in order for us to kind of get started with this, we took notes in our resource. And I already have notes written down, but I'm going to kind of talk through them for you. You'll need to write these down. So as I'm talking, just kind of start writing. That's fine. And then if I go too long, or if I go too short and you need more time, just pause it and you can do that. So we ended up talking about different types of characters. And I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see it a little bit better. So we have protagonist versus antagonist. This is something that you guys have learned quite a bit. But the difference between the two of those is that protagonist is like the good guy versus antagonist is the bad guy. So you have the protagonist who is usually the main character. They're usually good. And they are having some sort of conflict between this antagonist, this person or thing against them. They're kind of like the bad guy. Okay. As we keep going down and seeing the different other types of characters, you're going to see, just like this, that the protagonist is opposite of the antagonist. You're going to see that as we kind of keep going down. Okay. The next two that we have are round character and flat character. So again, you're going to be writing these down. If you don't have your notebook, just write it on a sheet of paper and you can stick it on page 37 when we get back. I should have said that. This is on page 37 in your resource notebook if you have it. Okay, so round character is a character that we know a lot about. It could be a protagonist or the antagonist. The story would not be the same without this character, and then has some sort of emotional connection. So the example I kind of used a lot with this is Moana. Just because my girls, they love watching Moana, okay? And so looking at this, too, we have the round character. We know a lot about Moana. She's definitely the protagonist. The story would not be the same. I mean, it's called Moana, for goodness sake, okay? So if Moana was not in Moana, it would not be the same. We do have emotional connection. She's sharing a lot of things about her life, and so it makes us, as the reader or the person, connect to it. Okay? The opposite of that would be like a flat character. We don't know much about this character. It could be anyone. The story would go on no matter what. There's really no real connection. There's no emotional connection with this character. So if I'm thinking about this one, I think about Hey Hey the chicken in Moana. Yes, funny. Has a lot of comedy to it. But even if Hey Hey was not there, the story would basically be the same. Okay? So again, you're going to write those down. Make sure you have those written down, and then you can move on to the next part. If you need to pause at any point, please go ahead and do so. All right, the last two that we're going to be looking at is dynamic versus static character. Dynamic character is a character who changes on the inside. So they have something that they were feeling before, but then at the end they change. So, like for instance, if they're scared, now they're brave, or if they were sad, now they're happy. So they change on the inside. This is usually the main protagonist, who kind of just is the main character. A lot of times you're going to see that your main character is going to be a round dynamic character. Okay, a lot of times. Sometimes not so much, but most of the time that's what's going to happen. And then the other one is a static character. So again, opposite. Dynamic character changes on the inside. Static character does not change. This could be a protagonist or antagonist, and they're just very reliable. They're always going to be blank. They're always going to be doing this. They're always going to be saving this. They're always going to be destroying this. So a very dependable, reliable character, never changing. When I think about this one, not necessarily from Moana, I kind of think of, for Frozen, I feel like Anna's pretty reliable in the sense of what she does because there's not a whole lot of change within her. She's a protagonist, but she's always there for Elsa. She's always there for blank. I feel like Olaf is probably also there. Doesn't really change. Not necessarily a main character. I think he has a lot to do with the story, but he is very reliable, always blank. Okay. So anyway, those are the notes on the different characters. So you're going to need to make sure that you have all of that written down. So please go ahead and do that. If you have your resource notebook, go ahead and do it on page 37. If not, just write it on a separate sheet of paper, and then you're going to tape that in your notebook when you get back. All right, so then going along with different characters. So that's the first thing we kind of look at. Then we also think about setting and that kind of stuff. But then we're going to look at conflict because conflict makes the story go. And so there's two different types of conflict. This is on page 36. Is we have internal conflict and we have external conflict. So I'm going to kind of go through what these notes are and what the different types of conflicts are and how we will be able to determine the different types. Okay, so internal conflict. And again, you're going to write this down. If you have your notebook, awesome, do it on page 36. If not, you're going to write it on a separate sheet of paper and you can tape it in when you get back. All right, so internal conflict. It's not visible. This is a struggle within the main protagonist. So it's an internal struggle. We can't see it. It's just internal. What's going to be happening is that the character is going to be asking these questions. What should I do? What if I'm wrong? Is it a yes or no question? There's a lot of self-doubt. Maybe they're too scared of something. And so they have this struggle within themselves. Okay, so that's the internal struggle. Okay, then after that, again, if you need to pause anytime, you can. We have the external conflict. And external conflict can be in different ways as well. This is obviously more visual. We can see these things. So we have man versus man. So it's protagonist versus antagonist. I just drew a little picture to kind of help myself see that as well. But that's where two people have a conflict with each other. Okay. Then you have man versus nature. So this is where the protagonist is having some sort of conflict with nature. So tornado, it could be thunderstorm, it could be something you're out in the wilderness, it could be a bear, it could be a tiger, it could be anything of that nature. Okay. So protagonist versus nature. Then we have man versus society. This would be the protagonist versus like a group of people, kind of like a government, so to speak. A lot of this falls underneath dystopian novels. So you're going to see that protagonist against this group of individuals running whatever. Okay. Then you also have man versus technology or supernatural. I go with sci-fi on this one. I guess it could also go underneath, because it says supernatural, it could be like a horror type thing too, but because you have a ghost. But this is the protagonist versus that technology or versus whatever it is. Okay? All right, so you have those different types of conflicts. So again, I want you to make sure that you are writing this down on page 36. If you don't have your resource notebook, you can write this on a separate sheet of paper and tape it when you get back. Okay, so if you need to pause to write that down, great. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and kind of move on with the last thing that we ended up doing. Okay, so what we ended up doing outside of that, actually, you know what? I'm going to stop for a second. After you have this written down on either page 36 and 37, when you have these two things written down, if you have them on the actual resource notebook, that's awesome, but I still want you to take a picture and send it to me in an email. If you do not have your notebook, I still want you to take a picture of what you wrote down and send it to me in an email so that way I can give you credit for doing that. Okay, so make sure that you do that. You just take a picture, send it to me. Otherwise, it's going to go in as missing because I didn't get to see your email. So take a picture of both of your notes that you ended up taking and then send it to me, and I will make sure to update the gradebook so it's not in there as missing. All right, so that was that for that one. Then in your sandbox notebook, and again, if you have it, awesome, you can do that in your sandbox. If you do not have it, do it on a separate sheet of paper, and again, we'll tape it in your sandbox when you get back. All right. So what we ended up doing, and I'm going to kind of talk through this one, and I'll give you time to write some other stuff down in a minute. But this is all about fiction stories and how fiction stories are set up with different story elements. We talked about how different fiction books we need to be looking for character, setting, conflict, and theme. And then we also pay attention to that emotion that's happening with the characters. And so what we ended up doing today in class is we read this little book here. And so I'm going to read this to you, and I'm going to kind of talk about what I'm seeing as a reader, and then I'll show you what we wrote down as a class, and you'll have to write that down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read this, and I'm going to kind of do it choppy because I want to kind of read and show you what my brain is thinking, because as a good reader of fiction, we want to make sure that we're stopping and thinking about what we're reading and what our brains are thinking about for the character, how their emotions are changing, what the setting is, how that affects the piece, what the conflict is, how that makes the piece continue to go, and then what the theme is, what the lesson of this or the moral of the story is. Okay, so this is called A Little Bit Brave. So I'm just going to read this to you really quickly so you have this story down. All right, so Logan was a stay-at-home bunny. His friend Luna was the daring one. She had new adventures every day. They sounded quite exciting, but rather frightening too. So whenever Luna said, "Come out with me, it's fun," Logan said, "Oh no, I'll never go outside. It's far too scary." Okay. So my brain right now is thinking, okay, so I have two characters. Great. I know their names, but I want to know more about them. Who are these actual characters? Okay. So we have Logan and we have Luna. Logan seems to be scared. He's kind of like, ugh, I don't know if he's anxious, he's nervous, he's scared. Whereas we have Luna. Luna seems to be like outgoing, brave, like she's excited, that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'll write that down on my paper here in a second. I'm going to keep going though. Okay? All right. At last, Luna had had enough. "You have to come out with me." "No," said Logan. "You're no fun," said Luna. "I'm too scared," said Logan. "Sometimes, Logan, you just have to be a little bit brave," shouted Luna as she stomped out. All right, so partially we're kind of seeing what the conflict is. Like, we know that Luna's mad. We don't really know what's happening yet. So we're getting up to that conflict here in a second. We do know that it's taking place right now, at least, in this bunny house is what I've called it. So we could put that as like the setting type thing. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Logan tried to have a normal morning. He watered his indoor plants. He dusted his shell collection. He baked some cookies, but nothing felt right. He was very upset. Luna had never been angry with him before. "I have to make it up with her right away," he thought. There was just one problem. Luna was outside. All right, so now we have this conflict. This conflict is that Logan wants to apologize to Luna, but something's in the way, her being outside, because he doesn't want to go outside. Okay, so that's the conflict. Okay, so he wants to find Luna to apologize, but she's outside, and he's afraid of outside. Okay, all right. It would be an adventure, and Logan had never had one of those. He had no idea what to pack, so he took a snorkel, a flashlight, and a tin of cookies. Then he put on his favorite scarf, gathered up all his courage, and tiptoed out. It was strange and noisy in the woods. There was flapping and scurrying, tweeting and rustling. I knew it would be scary, thought Logan. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second. So now my setting's changed. My setting is not in this bunny house anymore. He's outside. He's outside and in the woods. Okay, he's still scared, that kind of thing, but we're going to see what's going to happen. He took a deep breath and called, "Luna!" There was no reply. But lots of other animals scampered up. "Luna," they said. "She's the bravest bunny in the world. She dives into the river and collects shells," said an otter. "She rides around on the forest on my back," said a deer. "She explores the deep, dark caves and goes looking for bears," said a fox. "That sounds so scary," said Logan. "But if you do those things too," said a mouse, "perhaps you'll find her." So that's exactly what Logan did. First, he dived into the river. Splash! Brr, it was chilly. It was lucky he'd packed his snorkel. There was a whole new world underwater. Logan saw fish and frogs and snails, but he didn't see Luna. Then he rode off with a deer. Whoosh! My, it was fast. It was lucky he'd brought his scarf to help him hold on. There was a whole new world in the woods. He saw sparrows and squirrels and butterflies, but he didn't see Luna. All right, so I'm going to stop here for a second because right now I feel like I'm kind of getting into the theme a little bit, because he's kind of persevered. He's persevered in the sense of he's facing his fears. He was afraid of outside, but now he's going outside. He's facing his fears. He's trying new things. So those could be types of themes. Try new things. You don't know until you try. Face your fears. Those are all different types of themes. Okay, so it's like what he's learning, or what the reader's learning. Okay. Then he tiptoed into a cave. Eek! It was lucky he'd packed his flashlight. There was a whole new world in the dark. He saw bats and spiders and sleeping bears, but he didn't see Luna. Logan was amazed at all the things he'd done. If only I could find Luna, he said. She'd be really proud of me. He was so pleased with himself, he decided to have a cookie. But before he could open the tin, he heard a shout. Stay back, you wicked wolf. That voice sounded very familiar. In fact, it sounded just like Luna. Oh no, a huge wolf was trying to eat her. Logan hid behind a tree, and suddenly he didn't feel brave at all. I want to go home, he whimpered. But he couldn't let Luna be eaten. So he picked up his cookies, gathered up all his courage, and ran. No, he cried. Don't eat Luna. Eat my cookies! The wolf was very surprised. Cookies, he said. I don't mind if I do. And he gobbled up the whole lot. The wolf was very friendly after that. That was amazing, cried Luna. When did you become so brave? I think it started this morning, said Logan, when I was baking cookies. Luna laughed. Shall we go home and bake some more? I'd like that, said Logan. But first, we need another adventure. Okay, so from this, like, he's learned that, hey, I know that, like, this theme is that try new things, face your fears. Like, good things can happen even if you're scared of something. And then if I think about the very end, though, he did change. He changed on the inside. He's more of a dynamic character, Logan is. And so at the end, he is brave. And so in our sandbox, this is what we ended up doing on a separate 2-page spread. And if you don't have your notebook, just write this on a separate sheet of paper, and you'll write this, tape it into your notebooks when you get back. Okay, so A Little Bit Brave is the title. We were looking for characters. We were talking about setting. We were talking about conflict and theme. And as I was reading that, I kind of stopped every so often. And when in class, when I stopped every so often, what I would do is I would go back and I would actually write down what I was thinking. Okay, so I started with the characters. With what's going on, and then I ended with this. This is the end. This is that he's brave. But then I started with the setting after that, and then I went to the conflict, and then I went to theme, and just jotting these things down. Because as a reader of fiction, this is kind of a nice thing to do. Is go, okay, who are these characters? Where is this taking place? Why does this matter? What is the conflict? How is the story progressing? And then again, what is the theme? The theme is a big one, in the sense of the whole reason, why is the author writing this? That's what the theme is. And so the theme drives the forces for all these other things. So as you are becoming your own writer and doing narrative writing with Mrs. Oathout, you can think about, okay, well, what is my theme? Why am I writing what I'm writing? And then you can base your characters and your setting and your conflict off of that. Okay? So you need to write this down. If you have your sandbox, it's on the next 2-page spread. If you don't have your sandbox, still write it down, please. And you're going to tape that back into your notebook when you get back to school. I will ask, though, that you take a picture of this and send it to me once you get it completed, so that way I can give you credit. If I don't get this as a picture, or it's going to be counted as missing. So just make sure that you do that. Send me a picture, and we'll be good to go. All right, that's kind of all we did. Again, make sure that you read for 30 minutes. Otherwise, we'll see you when you get back. If you have any questions, please email me. All right, thanks.